In the annals of Irish history, few names evoke as much controversy and notoriety as Dessie O'Hare, infamously known as the Border Fox. Born on October 26, 1956, in Keady, County Armagh, O'Hare's life story is a complex tapestry woven with threads of political violence, criminal activities, and attempts at redemption. His journey from a young paramilitary recruit to one of Ireland's most wanted men, and later, a convicted criminal seeking rehabilitation, mirrors the tumultuous history of Northern Ireland itself. O'Hare's upbringing was deeply rooted in Irish republicanism. His family had a long history of involvement in the cause, with his grandmother having served time in a British prison for her Republican associations, and his father and uncles experiencing internment during the 1940s. Growing up in this environment of resistance and perceived oppression, it's perhaps unsurprising that O'Hare was drawn to paramilitary activities from a young age. The political and social climate of Northern Ireland in the 1960s and early 1970s was one of increasing tension and violence. The civil rights movement, which sought to address discrimination against the Catholic minority, was met with fierce opposition from loyalist groups and elements within the security forces. This period, known as the Troubles, saw the resurgence of paramilitary organizations on both sides of the conflict. At the tender age of 16, O'Hare joined the Provisional IRA, a decision that would set the course for much of his adult life. The Provisional IRA, formed in 1969, was committed to using armed struggle to achieve a united Ireland, free from British rule. For young men like O'Hare, joining the IRA was seen as a way to fight against perceived injustice and oppression. However, O'Hare's time with the Provisional IRA was relatively short-lived. He later aligned himself with the INLA, a more radical splinter group known for its extreme tactics and Marxist ideology. Joining the INLA, formed in 1974, quickly gained a reputation for its willingness to engage in acts of violence that even the IRA considered beyond the pale. It was during his time with INLA that O'Hare began to build his reputation as a skilled evader of justice, earning him the nickname the Border Fox. This moniker referred to his ability to move freely across the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, exploiting the jurisdictional difficulties faced by law enforcement on both sides. As O'Hare became more deeply involved in paramilitary activities, a darker side of his personality emerged. His participation in internal INLA feuds and boastful claims of killing 26 people revealed the depths of his violent nature. One particularly disturbing incident highlighted his volatile character. He reportedly shot at his own wife during an argument over another man. O'Hare's first significant brush with the law came at age 19 when he was found guilty of possessing explosives. He received a suspended sentence, a relatively light punishment that failed to deter him from further criminal activities. This early encounter with the justice system would be the first of many, setting the stage for a life marked by violence and repeated incarcerations. In 1979, O'Hare and his unit were involved in one of the most shocking acts of his career, the killing of Margaret Hearst, a 24-year-old single mother and British Army member. The brutality of this act was compounded by the fact that Hearst was shot dead in front of her 3-year-old daughter, mother, and grandmother. This incident highlighted the ruthlessness of O'Hare and his associates and the devastating impact of their actions on innocent families. 2 years later, O'Hare was accused of attempting to murder a groom at his wedding. The target, Lieutenant Gary Cass, another British Army member, had just exited St. Patrick's Church in County Meath after his wedding ceremony, when O'Hare and an accomplice allegedly shot him twice.
Mr. Cass, a member of the British Army, had just married a local girl, Miss Jacqueline Johnson. They left the church and were posing for photographs when 3 men pulled up in a car. One of the eyewitnesses to what happened next was a local disc jockey, Neil Lacey. What happened?
Well, I was just arrived here on my bike and I was just watching the wedding when a car stopped and three men jumped from the car, and one of them fired a light machine gun, some shots from a light machine gun into the air, which dispersed the crowd, and two more of them walked over into the lawn of the church and fired some shots at the groom and bride, and then they ran off, and that was it as far as I was concerned.
Lieutenant Cass was rushed to hospital seriously wounded, but is now thought to be out of danger. After the shooting, shocked guests refused to talk to press. Indeed, some of them furiously attacked journalists and had to be restrained by Gardaí. Some of those guests complained of a lack of security. The gunman's car, a red Cortina, was found burnt out near Navan, and Gardaí are still protecting other members of the wedding party tonight. Lieutenant Cass is a member of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, and it's thought he comes from the Isle of Wight. One other guest was slightly injured. Some were treated for shock. The Taoiseach, Mr. Lynch, said tonight that it was hard to believe that any group, no matter how base, could shoot down a man in cold blood in such a manner. He said the crime was all the more reprehensible that it was done at the end of a marriage ceremony. He wished the victims a speedy recovery and extended his sympathy to the young bride and both families.
In a twist of fate, O'Hare was acquitted after a trial based solely on visual identification evidence, highlighting the difficulties in prosecuting paramilitary crimes during this period. O'Hare's life of violence didn't come without personal cost. Just weeks after his acquittal in the Cass case, he was shot twice during a South Armagh IRA raid. One of O'Hare's companions was killed in the incident, and another was injured. This event underscored the dangerous nature of O'Hare's chosen path and the constant threat of violence that surrounded him. In October 1979, O'Hare was again involved in a violent incident that would lead to his first lengthy imprisonment. He and two other IRA men were stopped by armed guards while driving a car containing a gun and ammunition. A dramatic chase ensued, ending when O'Hare crashed his vehicle through a herd of cattle and into a farmer's car before coming to rest in a field. O'Hare broke both ankles in the crash, and one of his passengers died. This incident resulted in a 9-year prison sentence for O'Hare, of which he served 6 years. During this incarceration, O'Hare's personal life took an unexpected turn. He became engaged to Claire Doyle shortly before being imprisoned, and they married in Portlaoise prison the following year. Their daughter was born soon after, adding a new dimension to O'Hare's life, even as he remained behind bars. This period of imprisonment and the formation of his own family could have been a turning point for O'Hare, an opportunity to reassess his life choices and consider a different path. However, upon his release in 1986, he quickly returned to his old ways. Upon regaining his freedom, O'Hare wasted no time in rejoining the INLA in Dundalk. He quickly became embroiled in a bloody feud between factions in Dundalk and Belfast, a period that saw a series of brutal killings. One of the most notorious incidents during this time was the murder of Mary McGlinchey, the wife of INLA man Dominic McGlinchey. O'Hare effectively took control of the Dundalk INLA, which at the time consisted of approximately a dozen active terrorists. It was during this period that O'Hare committed one of the most horrific acts attributed to him, the torture and killing of Tony McCloskey, a rival associate. McCloskey was kidnapped, subjected to severe torture, including having his ear and finger severed with a bolt cutter, before being shot and his body dumped in a rural area. In a later interview, O'Hare admitted to this gruesome act, showcasing a disturbing lack of remorse that would become characteristic of his public persona. O'Hare seemed to revel in his notorious status, carrying out murders and bank robberies while continually evading justice. Fueled by media attention, he even began referring to himself as the Border Fox when giving statements to authorities, demonstrating a level of bravado that would become his trademark. However, it was the infamous kidnapping of dentist Dr. John O'Grady in 1987 that would cement O'Hare's place in Irish criminal history and ultimately lead to his downfall. O'Hare led an INLA operation to kidnap Dr. O'Grady from his home in Dublin, demanding a ransom of £1.5 million. What followed was a 23-day ordeal that captivated and horrified the entire country.
What do you mean there's nothing on the statue? Did you look on the Our Lady statue at the 13th station of the cross in Limerick City in the cathedral? How many fucking cathedrals is there? I just sent word to my man to chop off 2 of his fingers. So I don't know what fingers they're going to chop off. So I'm going to pick up his fingers now. Yeah? So give me your home number so I can tell you where to get them. There was super glue on it. It's probably stuck underneath the actual statue. Now the statue was on top of a table. Well, it's just cost John 2 of his fingers. Now, and I'm going to chop them up in bits and pieces and send fresh lumps of them every fucking day if I don't get my money fast. Now, I'll ring you later and tell you where to pick these fingers up, the photographs and the note.
During this horrific episode, Dr. O'Grady was subjected to severe physical and psychological torture. In one particularly brutal act, O'Hare used a hammer and chisel to cut off 2 of O'Grady's fingers. This act of mutilation demonstrated O'Hare's capacity for extreme violence and served as a gruesome message to authorities about the seriousness of the kidnappers' intentions. The kidnapping ended when Dr. O'Grady was finally released from the house where he was being detained in Cabra, Dublin. While O'Hare initially managed to escape, he was later tracked down and shot by an army sniper. During the 23 days of the kidnapping, O'Hare and his INLA men had engaged in several gun battles with the guards, further highlighting the danger they posed to public safety. The following year, O'Hare was sentenced to 2 consecutive 20-year terms of imprisonment, one of the longest fixed-term prison sentences ever handed down in the Republic of Ireland for a non-capital murder offence. By this point, O'Hare had solidified his position as one of Ireland's most notorious gunmen. O'Hare remained in prison until 2006, when he was released under the terms of the Belfast Agreement, also known as the Good Friday Agreement. This historic peace accord, signed in 1998, aimed to bring an end to the decades-long conflict in Northern Ireland. As part of the agreement, many paramilitary prisoners, including O'Hare, were granted early release. Interestingly, O'Hare was the last of the state's inmates to qualify for early release under this historic peace accord. His release marked the end of an era, symbolizing the complex process of transitioning from conflict to peace in Northern Ireland. Following his release, O'Hare maintained a relatively low profile for several years. He settled in Newtown, Hamilton, engaging in farming and working with people with disabilities. He even ran a craft business using skills learned in prison. This period suggested that O'Hare might have turned away from his violent past, embracing a quieter, more peaceful existence. However, according to Guards intelligence, O'Hare hadn't entirely severed his ties with the criminal underworld. He was believed to have remained active in extortion, gaining a reputation as an enforcer in the business world. The authorities also suspected that he maintained contact with active dissident Republicans, including those associated with the new IRA, a group that rejected the peace process and continued to pursue armed struggle. O'Hare's attempt at a quieter life ended abruptly in 2015, when he became involved in the violent abduction and assault of Martin Byrne, a former security guard for the Mansfield family. Byrne was kidnapped by a 7-man gang, including O'Hare, after a meeting with businessman Jim Mansfield Jr. Byrne was taken to his house in Sagat and savagely beaten in front of his terrified wife. This violent act led to O'Hare's return to the courtroom in April 2019. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with 3 years suspended, for his role in the violent eviction of Byrne and his family. This incident demonstrated that despite his claims of rehabilitation, O'Hare was still capable of resorting to extreme violence. During his most recent imprisonment, O'Hare reportedly underwent a profound transformation. He developed interests in anthropology, psychology, metaphysics, and yoga, claiming to have discovered a divine force within himself. This spiritual awakening, if genuine, represents yet another surprising turn in the life of this complex and controversial figure. On June 27, 2024, at the age of 68, O'Hare was released from Portlaoise prison after serving the maximum time allowable for the false imprisonment and assault of Martin Byrne. His release once again brings his controversial legacy to the forefront of public discourse in Ireland. The story of Dessie O'Hare, the Border Fox, encapsulates many of the complex issues that have shaped modern Irish history. His life journey from a young IRA recruit to a notorious INLA leader, and then to a convicted criminal trying to reinvent himself, raises important questions about rehabilitation, justice, and the long-term impacts of political violence. As O'Hare steps back into freedom, many in Ireland will be watching closely. Will he be able to stay out of prison and leave his criminal past behind? Or will he once again find himself drawn back into illegal activities? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.